In the quiet of an imagined evening, we'll wander back through time together, walking slow streets lit by oil and tallow, hearing the hush of distant footsteps and the hollow echo of wind against stone. If you enjoy quiet history like this, consider subscribing before you drift off, and let your eyes grow heavy as we follow small, ordinary routines that filled entire lives. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? It is a simple question, but time and place matter in stories like this, because the way people relieve themselves, unremarkable to us, essential to them, was woven into the shape of this city and the heartbeat of the night. Imagine a castle on a hill after sunset, walls soaking up the warmth of a day already gone. Torches burn low in iron brackets, their flames fluttering when a passage breathes. Somewhere a door thuds shut, then quiet returns, pressing its shoulder against every corridor. Beyond a wooden screen, a servant lifts a small lamp and pads along a hollow-sounding floor, the tallow smell trailing in a thin ribbon. The light pauses at a narrow slit of a doorway, the garderobe. The word itself hints at clothing and guarding, for people once believed that the steam and scent of a human body could damage fine textiles, and so clothes were sometimes stored near these cool, ventilated shafts. A garderobe in a castle is a simple thing, almost shy in its design, a seat of smooth oak with a round opening, fitted over a chute that drops through the thickness of the wall into a dark pit or a trickle of water below. In winter the stone bites the skin. In summer the air drifts up with a breath of damp earth. The servant sets the lamp on a small shelf, rests for a moment, and listens to the white noise of night, the faint clatter from the kitchens, the muffled cough of a guard, the sigh of wind through arrow loops. Then they settle, unhurried, because there is no rush in this work. The castle moves at the speed of the flame. Within the walls, garderobes are tucked like sparrows' nests into corners, small privy rooms carved out of masonry, single-purpose and unboastful. Some look down over the outer ditch where rainwater sometimes flows, turning what leaves the human body back toward the open country. Others fall into cesspits. The word is blunt and honest, brick-lined or roughly walled, emptied when they fill, once a season, perhaps, or once a year. When the pit grows heavy and the air grows strong, word moves through the household. It is time to bring in the night workers. In the lanes below the castle, and in the tight streets of the old town, these workers are known by many names, and one of them, still remembered, is Gong Farmer. By lamplight or moonlight they come when most people sleep, because their work is easier done in the cool and because the city prefers to keep certain scents out of the sun. They lower barrels by rope, or climb down, steady and practiced. Their tools are simple, scoops, pails, and a kind of patience learned from repetition. They scrape, they lift, they sing to themselves sometimes, and they finish the way the sea finishes with a beach, thoroughly and without ceremony. Beyond the castle, the old city breathes in its own rhythm. Streets thread like veins between timbered houses, their upper stories leaning toward each other, as if exchanging secrets. Water runs in open rills along some lanes and sleeps in still, dark canals in others. If you pause at a corner and lean on the worn stone of a public fountain, you will see the ordinary choreography of evening: a woman returning with a pail that rocks on a wooden yoke, a boy carrying a bundle of kindling, a baker's apprentice emptying grayish water from a trough. People here use chamber pots in rooms warmed by braziers and bodies, because the comfort of not leaving your bed on a cold night is older than most laws. In the drowsy hours, a hand finds the earthenware handle, a curtain rustles, and the task is done quickly, neatly, often with ash nearby to keep things dry and quiet. In the morning, the pot is carried carefully to a doorstep or a backyard trench, or to a shared midden, or to one of the city's pits where the gong men will come. A good house keeps a bucket of sand beside the back door and a clean cloth folded on a peg, small signs of care that make a house feel rested. If you follow your nose through time to the ancient streets of a Mediterranean port, the scene changes but the small requirements stay the same. There, in public latrines built of smooth stone, people sit shoulder to shoulder on seats that look like a row of musical notes. The soundscape is different: the drip of water from a channel that runs before the feet, the distant splash of a fountain, the occasional scratch of a sandal on tile. Privacy is minimal, but habit breeds a practical modesty. Workers sweep the floor in long arcs. Someone has placed a sprig of rosemary near the entrance to sweeten the air. Along the wall stands a basin with a slow stream of water where a sponge on a stick is rinsed and shared, the way tools are shared at a public workshop. Used, cleaned, set down gently for the next pair of hands. It seems startling to us, but to them it is well maintained and civilized, and a city is judged by how well it handles what everyone must do. Back in our northern castle, the garderobe has its own quiet engineering. The chute is lined with smooth stones to discourage cling and to welcome gravity's help. A small vent may climb beside it as slender as a reed to draw the breath of the pit upward and out into the open air. Above the seat someone has carved a tiny cross or a simple star, not as a prayer or a proclamation but as a mark made by a hand that wanted to leave something pleasing where the eye might rest. Lime is sprinkled now and then, and herb sprigs are hung by twine, and the door swells slightly in the damp of autumn and shrinks again in the dry of winter. When a mason repairs the chute, he works with the same attention he gives a stair or a window, because a castle, like a person, is healthy when all its parts are tended. In towns, some houses have projecting privies, wooden boxes bracketed out from the upper story like a little swallow's porch, with a hole that drops into the yard. Children know to play elsewhere, and cats visit the warm corners beneath, busy with their own mysteries. When pits fill, a notice goes out along a chain of understanding that doesn't need writing: the night soil men will come. They move softly through lanes at the edge of sleep, carts muffled, lanterns shaded, boots steady over cobbles. Their eyes have learned to read the ground by feel. They knock at a door not loudly but with a rhythm that people recognize, and a sleepy voice answers from a window, and hinges creak. They work in pairs or threes. The world above dreams of summer orchards and long walks. The world below empties a season's worth of humbler harvest into barrels that will travel toward fields waiting for a quiet kind of nourishment. If you have ever imagined living like this, you might notice how the cycle resolves itself. What feeds us returns to the soil that will feed us again, and the circle turns without speeches. Sailors on a long voyage learn a different ritual, one that borrows the wind as a helper. On a ship with masts like tall fingers, a small balcony juts over the water near the bow, planked and braced, open to the salt and the spray. In day or night, one steps out there, grips the rail, and lets the sea carry away what leaves the body. The ocean is a blunt teacher of efficiency. It agrees to take most things and forgets them quickly. In rough weather, the work is cautious and clipped. In calm, there is a murmuring peace, and the stars keep company without judgment. A bucket is rinsed and set upside down to dry, and the ship slides on with the sound of water thudding softly against its ribs. In older cities that grew rich by trade, civic pride sometimes expressed itself in grand public bathhouses where warmth and cleanliness braided together for an afternoon's rest. People moved through rooms of different temperatures like musical notes again, warm, warmer, hot, then cool. Attendants carried pails of water and bundles of clean linen. Latrine rooms stood near the service corridors, kept scrubbed with sand, their floor drains rinsed with generous buckets. The idea was not luxury but order, everything in its place, everything done in a way that made tomorrow easier. In quieter towns, the dignity was smaller and no less real: a wooden bench with a hole over a screened trench, a pail of ash, a jug of fresh water, a cloth folded twice. When night fell, a candle bled a little warmth onto the wall, drawing a soft oval of light like a small pond. You would hear advice passed down in these places, not written in books but spoken over doorsteps and remembered in hands. Spread ash on the seat in winter to keep it from sticking. Hang sprigs of mint by the hinge, it keeps the air honest. Empty a chamber pot before the sun climbs. Do not wait until flies have time to remember it. Keep a small ladle near the basin so no one must reach into a bucket with bare fingers. Simple rules, like stones in a path. A grandmother shows a child how to rinse a clay pot without cracking it, and the child passes that carefulness forward years later without remark, the way people pass along a favorite song. Sometimes there were accidents, and even those found a rhythm of response. A privy shaft might clog with a season's worth of straw and careless scraps, and a slender boy would be lowered with a rope around his waist, a basket on one arm, and a grin that said he wasn't afraid. He would work in patient scoops while a man above told a dull, reassuring story about a harvest that was not remarkable but was sufficient. In a few hours the rope came up, the basket emptied, the shaft smoothed again. Everyone went about their day, the way a city heals a small cut without thinking about it. The materials people used tell their own soft story. In some regions, moss was gathered from stone walls and kept drying near stoves, a green-brown velvet that felt kind to the skin. In others, bundled straw was cut into short, manageable switches that could be thrown into the pit afterward, adding roughage to a mass that appreciated structure. Where flax grew well, scraps of linen from worn shirts were given a last useful life as cloth wipes, washed in a bucket with ash lye, rinsed, and hung where the air moved. In homes that could afford it, a ceramic pot with a painted lip made the ordinary act feel tidy. In humbler rooms, a wooden bucket lined with wax did the same job with a touch less dignity and the same efficiency. A city is an orchestra of materials, and each neighborhood keeps time with what it has. In certain river cities, the water itself helped, at least for a while. Houses leaned over canals with small doors that opened directly onto the flow. A pot was emptied, and the river accepted it with a shrug. But rivers remember, and in the heat of summer they sometimes returned what they had taken, not as a rebuke but as a law of nature asserting itself. People learned to draw their drinking water upstream and to do their less lovely work downstream. They learned to let a barrel of water settle so the silt fell to the bottom as soft as sleeping birds. They learned that boiling made a difference, even if they did not speak of it in the language we use now. Castles kept their own small economies around these routines. A steward counted soap deliveries with a bit of charcoal, made notes about the lime that kept pits from waking too early, and watched the calendar for the nights when the gong men were expected. Servants, mostly young and quick, rotated through the more private tasks with a practiced calm, emptying pots with the same quiet pride they took in laying a table straight. An older woman might be the person everyone trusts for tasks no one likes to name, because her face says that ordinary work is as honorable as any. She remembers which herbs sweeten a room without noise, which cupboards benefit from a small dish of charcoal, which stones along the garderobe wall stay warm even on cold days. If you asked her how people use the bathroom in a castle, she would shrug and tell you it's the same as everywhere. Close the door, mind your balance, take your time. Then she would lift her lamp and move on to something else. Let's step for a moment into a rain-silvered morning in a market town. Stalls are going up in a sleepy clatter, and puddles reflect triangles of sky. A public house opens its door, and with it the warm smell of yeast and wood smoke. In a corner by the courtyard stands a simple privy, scrubbed with rough salt and rinsed with buckets, a broom waiting beside it like a sentry off duty. A traveler lifts the latch, and behind the door the wood is smooth from many hands. A small crack near the top lets in a blade of light that falls across the seat in a gentle stripe. There is chalk on a shelf and a small board for messages, safe roads here, a mule for sale, a note that a child's glove was found near the bridge. The traveler leaves the door as clean as they found it. This, too, is part of the social fabric, the unspoken agreement that we leave shared spaces a little better than we found them. Tell me in the comments if you'd last a week like this, moving through a world where courtesies are simple and the tools are honest. In palaces built later, where water could be coaxed to run upward through cleverness, you begin to hear a different music, the current through lead or clay pipes, the whisper of cisterns filling with captured rain, the quiet slap of a wooden float rising in a tank. A room is tiled in shapes that reflect light, and a pull of a chain sends a sudden rush that seems almost magical to anyone who grew up with a pot and a pit. But even here, attendants check the valves with routines inherited from lamptenders and well-keepers. They listen for trickles that should be silences, they feel for dampness where the wall wants to be dry, they lift lids and drift a finger over the water to know if it is clean. The change is one of mechanism, not of need. A person still closes a door, still breathes out, still reaches for something to wipe with, still washes their hands at a basin where water catches light and makes it flutter on the plaster. If you step into a snowlit morning in the far north, you find that the body behaves differently in cold air. Outbuildings for these tasks are set near paths that are kept tamped down by boots and sleds. because nobody wants to walk far in a wind that bites. The seat is sometimes insulated with a cushion of felt or a wooden lid warmed near the stove and carried quickly with a grin. Ash is prized as much as bread, because it keeps a room drier and friendlier. In summer, the same building opens its door to the sound of bees and the smell of resin, and the work is easier, but people still move with care. Lids closed, pails covered, hands washed at a basin where the water is cold enough to surprise. The seasons are an extra set of instructions, but the steps are the same. Behind monasteries, where routine is a kind of devotion to order rather than a statement about belief, you find rills that carry water steadily along stone gutters, washing through latrine blocks at a tempo set by gravity. The wash water is diverted to gardens afterward, and the soil there is dark and soft under the fingers. A brother repairs a crack with lime mortar, his strokes patient and unhurried, the way he copies a page of text. Another sweeps, not because anyone will praise him, but because sweeping makes tomorrow easier. The latrine is ventilated by a long chimney, and swallows nest in the rafters, combining their own little requirements with human ones. The place is plain and very clean, folded into the day the way a rest is folded into a song. Have you ever imagined living like this, bound to hours that repeat, learning the peace that comes from work well done? In cities built on hills, gravity lends a hand. In flat cities, ditches and canals and later pumps take its place. In all of them, what matters most is the habit of paying attention. A householder notices when a pit is filling ahead of schedule and arranges for it to be emptied before a festival crowds the streets. A street sweeper knows which alley collects puddles and sprinkles a little sand there. A cart driver learns to cover his load more securely on warm days. These are the small negotiations that keep a settlement comfortable. They don't make it into chronicles because they are not dramatic. They are the dull gold behind the bright threads. We could open many more doors. In a desert caravanserai, a clay jar stands near a low door, filled at dawn from a deep well that tastes of stone. A square of woven palm hangs inside a niche, damp and cool. Footprints mark a path of sand to a pit lined with brick. People step lightly to it at night when the stars pour overhead in their thousands, the air both thin and generous. In a mountain village, an outhouse stands on the edge of a slope where the view is grand even during unglamorous chores. The wind there is a friend that carries things away. Old boards creak. A latch clicks. A hand rests for a moment on a sun-warmed wall before returning inside to the smell of soup. Everywhere, people do what people do, and everywhere they shape the task to the climate, the materials, the habits that make their days feel right-sized. Back in our castle, dawn peels the darkness away slowly. The first shift wakes, and the kitchens breathe their warm breath. Someone brings fresh straw for the stables, someone stirs a pot that will simmer half the day, and someone, quietly, empties last night's vessels into a larger one and carries it steadily down a stair that curves like a shell. The work is not glamorous, but it is strangely satisfying, one of those tasks that, when done, makes a space feel reborn. The garderobe door is propped open to let new air mingle with old stone. A sprig of savory is replaced with mint because the season has turned. The shelf is wiped with a cloth wrung out over a bucket of water that has cooled since it was warmed at the hearth. A hand presses the cloth flat to squeeze one last drop, lays it to dry, and the room is done. That is how people went to the bathroom in castles, privately, carefully, with as much dignity as a small space allows. As cities grew, people looked for ways to make these ordinary moments gentler. Some invented portable chairs that hid a chamber pot under a padded seat, transforming necessity into a piece of furniture that could sit in a bedchamber without shouting its purpose. Others improved glazes on pottery so that cleaning took less effort and less water. In some places, perfumed cones smoldered slowly through the night, not to disguise but to soften. The thread through all these changes is kindness, to the nose, to the skin, to the person tasked with cleaning, to tomorrow's self who will be grateful for a small effort made today. And always there was water, the patient ally. A basin in a corner reflects candlelight the way a pond reflects the moon. Hands rinse. A cloth is wrung and hung. The act of washing closes the moment like a book sliding shut. In public places, a bucket stands ready for the next person. In private rooms, a small jug is refilled without being asked. This is the part of the story that makes the city purr quietly, the way one person anticipates the next, how a space signals that it has been cared for. If this kind of slow, ordinary history helps you rest, and if you'd like more nights like this, consider subscribing before you drift off. The afternoon is warm now in our imaginary town. The public latrine by the market is not busy, but it is steady. A woman enters with a toddler who has just learned the necessary patience. She speaks softly about waiting one more moment, about taking turns, about washing little hands and then holding them up, palms out, to dry in the breeze. A teenage boy, shy but trying to prove he is a man, comes in after them, nods, and looks at the floor to give them their privacy. An older man, a carpenter by the evidence of his sleeves, comes last. He hooks his cap on a peg and reaches for the ladle with the graceful economy of someone who uses tools all day. No one writes this down, but it is the city's true biography. Evening returns. A few windows brighten earlier than others, and silhouettes pass behind shutters. In an upstairs room, a traveler opens a small wooden chest that holds a folded cloth, a bar of rough soap, a small bottle of oil, and a tin cup. They set the objects out with the neatness that makes a place feel like theirs, even for one night. They take the chamber pot from beneath the bed and check that it is clean, because it is easier to trust your own eyes. They set a folded cloth beside it, and smile at the way the room seems suddenly kinder. It is a tiny ritual that says, this body will be cared for here. Later, when the streets have fallen almost silent and the night guard's feet count the hours along the wall, the traveler will use the pot, cover it, and sleep. In the morning, they will carry it to the back step with a kind of modest pride, because travel teaches you to be respectful of other people's thresholds. Winter arrives in our story without a fuss. The cold makes breath visible, and the stone holds it like a secret. Privy doors stick again, and hands learn to lift and push, then to nudge the latch with the side of a fist that is less likely to sting. People move faster across yards, but inside the rooms they move slower, conserving effort. Ash becomes generous. The night workers shift their hours to the long dark, when carts can move through streets without worrying a horse or a neighbor. They become a familiar part of the city's sleep, a low wheel turning, a murmur, the damp scrape that means a pit is growing lighter. If you listen from a window and breathe into your sleeve to keep your nose warm, you can hear the rhythm of the work and the occasional laugh. It is not a miserable job when done with company and a good lantern. Spring follows, and with it the small zeal that arrives when windows are opened for the first time in months. People air out linens and scrub floors on their knees and scoop out corners that have gathered dust and bark. The garderobe shelves glow briefly with a sheen of water before drying to their usual mat. A new sprig of something green appears near the hinge, and someone decides to sand a rough edge that has bothered them all winter. There is nothing heroic about any of this, but many lives are made better by it. What, then, have we seen? We have seen that people in castles and old cities manage their most private needs with the tools and customs at hand, garderobes dropping into pits or flowing water, chamber pots emptied with care, public latrines that were social spaces as much as conveniences, outbuildings that faced the weather, night workers who kept the system moving, and 1,000 small acts of cleanliness that formed the real foundation beneath famous stories. We have seen that the body's needs don't change, but the ways we meet them can be made gentler by attention. We have noticed that, in every place and period, the quiet dignity of doing things properly wins out over anything flashy. And we have walked through it all at the speed of a candle. Before you rest completely, you might share one thought to guide tomorrow's wanderings. Tell me where you imagine yourself fitting into this old picture: castle or cottage, city or ship, desert or mountain? Would you keep mint or rosemary by your door? Would you prefer the privacy of a tiny garderobe with thick stone around you, or the sociable hum of a well-kept public latrine where the floor is warm and the water runs steady? And if these gentle forays into ordinary history help you drift to sleep, remember there are more rooms to explore on future nights, more hushed corridors and small rituals that make up the day. If you enjoy quiet history like this, consider subscribing before you drift off. For now the lamp is low, the streets are emptying, and the stone keeps the memory of footsteps without needing to repeat them. Rest, and let the simple, careful ways of the past hold you a little while longer.